Hello, welcome to my premium deck profiles. This is based on Gurguit with the new erratas from History Collection. So this is a very exciting time for the game because we're seeing the old G bosses now becoming a bit more useful again, because for quite a while now we've had VRs and anything against gift markers basically becoming kind of like the dominating force in premium format. So it's kind of displaced all the G era stuff, and there's been like this sort of burning nostalgia for G era. So I'm glad they've come up with this set and they're doing things now about to try and help the old decks again, which is basically takes us back to kind of the good old days of Vanguard as well. And there are some really fun Strider abilities because they have like these very unique skills for striding over them, whereas with gift markers they kind of feel a bit hollow because you're just getting like, with a lot of them you're just getting kind of very generic abilities such as the gift markers themselves, which a lot of other clans share. So yeah, let's go through this. You can play any starting Vanguard. So I'm just playing Coel for this one to keep it on brand. And then we've got 4 copies of Gurguit. So the original grade 3, you cannot use the VR because if you do, then you won't be able to gain the gift markers from the Campbell stride. So the idea is that if you haven't gained any gift markers yet and you go into the on-hit strides that have been errated, then you'll gain 2 markers. I'm going to assume that every stride will have 2 markers. There's no reason, I don't think there's any reason for the 2 force markers to be exclusive only to the force decks. Yes, it's not a plus, but the thing is that it can hard neg your opponent, and you've seen some of the decks that are running around right now. You've got Reindeer, you've got Steam Maidens. They're insanely aggressive because they can reuse these circles with force markers. So being able to reuse those circles is very dangerous, and because of that, I don't think they're going to really punish like Protect and Axel just because they are pluses, because they may be plussing, but they're not doing as much aggressively for the most part, and they haven't been anyway for quite some time now. So that's that. You kind of just have to make support cards around it, if anything. And so Gurguit's also nice because he can +1 onto the field when you stride over him, so you can still maintain and build your board, which helps when you're trying to kind of keep up with the Axel circles that you're generating, because obviously while Axel 2 can draw, you might draw into cards that would be good to have for defense reasons. So there's that as well. And so this helps actually make the deck more defensive in the process, which is really nice. Also, your Superior Called unit gains 2k, which is another cool thing. But the Generation Break 2 of this card is what makes this deck really shine. Because the thing is that you're looking at top 4, you're calling 1 Guardian. So you call only 1 rather than 2, and you're not checking top 5, you're checking top 4. But you're using it as many times as you want, as long as you have the CB and the Soul Blast for it. The Soul is very easy to pay, the Counter Blast is obviously a lot more finer, but it's quite easy to get Counter Blast in this deck, and that's what I found anyway in testing with this. So it's very good for defense, and the Generation Break 2 is easy to activate, as it's always been since Spearcross came out. Obviously when Spearcross came out, nobody played this because Ezel was just cracked and it overshadowed the entire clan basically in the process. But this was actually something that I was trying out back in the day with Spearcross Dragon, because it was quite fun to enable GB2 and then have your defensive combos available right as soon as your opponent does their first stride turn. Next we have 4 copies of Percival. So ideally you don't want to ride into this, but he's obviously the backup ride if things go wrong. The thing is with this card is that he's able to get you the 3rd Axel marker, so you can use Campbell to get 2 markers, and then use him, you get the 3rd. You can also Monster Reborn or call from your deck the Aglavel, so that's good. So you have good access to Aglavel, which means you can keep on attacking with big numbers because Aglavel gains 10k power. That means you also don't have to play as many copies because you can go for the drop zone rather than just the deck as well. And another thing as well is that he can be called from anywhere. So if you call him from deck, you can still gain Axel, which is quite nice with this deck, because that means that Gore Paladin's own characteristic can help. There are a lot of cards in V series that call from hand, whereas the G series version, the Gurguit playstyle, you can kind of capitalize a bit more on the call from deck, especially with cards like the Gurguit Grade 3 and some of his support cards. Next we have 3 copies of Solanius. This card can give all your units 2k, but also this card is a very good defender, so he's not simply a 5k intercept, he's actually a move into Soul, and then you guard with top 2. So you can find some really good cards to guard with. So it adds more to the defensive capability of the deck. Honestly, I'd probably consider bumping it to 4. And there are a lot of other cards I can consider playing, so maybe I'd probably have some ideas on what I can do with that. 3 Aglavels, you don't have to go 4, but he's actually quite nice if you get him early game because you can rush with him. Besides just riding him for the Spirit Core, I actually like the idea of just going like call a rear guard and then swing and rush at the opponent. You can even get 13k beaters sometimes, like maybe you go into parry more, maybe you can call like Jeffrey from your hand, gain 5k, and then you can call Aglavel, so that Jeffrey rush, parry more attack, and then Aglavel goes to 19k, and then both your rear guards, one goes to soul, this one goes to your hand. And obviously that's useful because it means then your Vanguard is the only attack target, which means that damage denial is hard to do without denying themselves a drive check, because your deck is playing 9k bases as well. So a lot of decks are playing 9k pluses now. Some are playing 10 increasingly, because obviously there's a lot of force decks running around, but also you've got some decks like Silverthorns or any sort of Palmoon variant that plays it because it's such a good card, which is the new Lillian card. So Lillian is 10k as well, and it's quite a popular one at that. So yeah, 19k rush is good. Also builds soul, so you can use your other Gurguit skills, pay costs and things. It's just it's very easy to also search out because of Percival, and it helps to get around damage triggers. And also cards like Resius in Bermuda, or their new G-Guard, or even just anything that gives basically the Vanguard power. And then we've got 3 copies of Perrymore, so he's searchable via Jeffrey as well, so he's like a grade 2 search target that you can find for riding, but also he's a stabilizer because you can CB1 and draw. The other thing is that he can defend and gain power when superior called, so basically he's a 14k beater, or he's a 10k shield, which is very handy when you're calling grades as well, or you're just calling from a deck as well. Then we've got 4 copies of Canaries. This card is really good. There is a V-Series promo which is almost power crept in a way, because they kind of just take away the GB1 and they give him some extra shield gain as well. But there is one problem with the old Canaries, which is that you can't superior call grade 3s, whereas this one can. So obviously if you check the top 3 and you find Percival, then you can actually call the Percival and gain the Axel marker, which I think is a reason to play this over. But I also prefer this over Wonder Ezel, because Wonder Ezel calls from hand, whereas this one doesn't. And this card also gains power, so you can hit against 13k bases, so he becomes a 13k. On an Axel marker is an 18, so you can even hit a Shield Fisher Dragon as well. And that's really handy to have, but also you're discarding to check the top 3, so you might be able to extend it to an even better card, another card to call that would be useful as well. So I think being able to kind of go through the deck, because usually when you're calling from hand, you're kind of calling a lot of your good cards already in the main phase, but then it's just your drive checks at that point that's left to choose between, so you don't really have as great opportunity sometimes to go for. I mean, to be fair, this is also check top 3, just like your drive checks are check top 3, but this sort of like compensates for the fact you're discarding one, because Wonder Ezel doesn't have a discard cost like this card does, but you're calling with Wonder Ezel, it's actually kind of like a secret discard, because the card you're calling is sort of like the discard in a way. So that's another thing as well. Then Gorbajuk, 4 copies of the V-Series one. You can go for G-Era. This card has the advantage of being a 10k shield, so you want to have more 10k shields in the deck, so that if your opponent high rolls you and you're on the receiving end, then you don't die as easily, which is sort of a reason to lean on it. But also the G-Era version, you have to call it to rearguard, which means you need to have another grade 1 to ride, which then means you're calling even more units onto the field, which gives you less defensive capabilities. Now, if you happen to have a grade 3 heal in hand, it's great, but also if you don't, it sucks because you might just die quickly to a Pulse Sister combo or something. But the G-Series version, obviously if you get him in the right way, he can search for Gurguits without kind of RNGing your way into it. This card also gains power, unlike the G version, which means that you can make numbers and hit hard against your opponent as well. So that's always good to have, whereas the 7k would sort of be a bit of a sitting duck in some situation. Then 4 copies of Jeffrey. He's also a 13k if called via card abilities such as Perrymore or Gurguit or something, which is nice. But he also gains shield, so he becomes a 15k shield grade 1 as well if it's superior called via card ability as well. And we've got a whole bunch of Guardians as we've seen. He's also a very good ride, just like Gorbajuk is a good ride, which also puts Gorbajuk above G-Era Gorbajuk, because these 2 cards, they work on Vanguard and help you find Gurguit. Now, you're not guaranteeing Gurguit like with the G-Era version, but they are giving you chances. And it's always nice to have, like, to play into those chances while getting the payoff of actually having better shield quality and also having better offensive quality as well. So those are trade-offs. Gorbajuk V-Series can also search for heals as well. But the thing is with this Jeffrey is that Jeffrey can also look for Perrymore, so it's not even just Gurguit. You can look for Perrymore as well, and then you can also stabilize your ride-ups. Also avoid riding into other grade 2s as well that you might have in hand already, that you might want to maybe save for the rear guard instead, such as Solanius. Then we've got 4 copies of Carrinus. So Carrinus is basically a really good counter charge. We're not playing Din Drain, and this card's more reliable because you don't have to Superior Call it in specific ways. You can just literally use it in the main phase. You get the counter charge, and you give 4k to any unit. I mean, you can consider Din Drain, honestly. Like, I'm still kind of early to test this, but I just felt like this is an absolute must play, and I didn't have space really. But obviously, if you wanted to maybe try the G series Gorbajuk, you can always take out V, play that, and then play Din Drain instead of Jeffrey. That's an option as well. This card can help you gain more power, which I really like, so that you can hit over the stronger Vanguards, so that if they get damage triggers or they use hand traps or anything, or have Shield Fisher Dragons as Vanguard, you can then go for that bigger number, and all that by just resting her, and then returning any card to your deck, like bottom of your deck. It can even be the Over Trigger, by the way. And then, which by the way, that's a whole other topic, because whether or not to play the Over Trigger is a bit of a debate in Gold Paladin. But the thing is that this card can then draw back and counter. So you might find something better to defend with, or you might find a card that you can call and attack with after. So that's also good. And also gains resist if you have a Unite Vanguard. So during your own turn, you can stride a Unite Stride and then use it. Obviously, you can't use it with something like Campbell, because Campbell doesn't have Unite. But the other strides in this G-Zone, some of them have Unite. And because the original Gurguit is not a Unite skill, unfortunately, you cannot use it against decks like Link Joke or Cargo, who might try to, or Narukami actually, who might try to like destroy your field during their own turn. You'll only be able to get the protection during your attacking turn, so you can at least deal with the hand traps a bit with it. But I don't think that's really going to be like the kind of main play, because you're playing Axle Circles anyway, and them going after Carrinus is just a bit strange anyway, so it's not as likely to happen. Then we've got 4 copies of Gold Garnish Line. You could take one of these out for an Over Trigger. The thing is that the Cat 1 can deck you out, but maybe you might find it useful because you do get a ton of drive checks, which can scale the opponent, and you can scale power through that. Otherwise, you can play the Vanilla Over Trigger and give 2 units 100 million, which can then be lethal as well, actually. Especially even if they get a damage trigger and they stop your other attacks. At least now you know there's 2 attacks that are hitting. You can also play fronts as well if you want to go for that route. The thing is that this card is not as likely to be used because your Campbell Stride, the Errata Stride, is the one that you're mainly going into. And you have to discard some of grade 3, which doesn't include the Stride cost based abilities. So Gold Garnish is more for your second Stride, if anything, as well. But this card's more important, which is the Errata Scarface line, because this can go to Soul and Draw, which is obviously what G1 crits also do. But also you're giving your Vanguard 5 as well, which is nice to have. On top of that, you could maybe play GB1 crits actually, because I'm thinking like the thing is, this card's main advantage over the GB1 crit, because you're always going to try and stride anyway. The main advantage this card has is that if you damage check it, you draw 1, which is really useful to have. And to be fair, 10k power doesn't always do that much compared to 5. I think like usually your opponent just tries to PG it or something at that point, and then you just pass your triggers to rear guard so that can hit instead. So it might not be that bad to still do this over GB1. Then we've got 4 copies of the PG, so we need this because, well, we don't have space to play normal perfect guards in the main deck anyway. And then 4 grade 3 heals. The grade 3 is the kind of feature because you can use that potentially with Slamy Flare, for example, to basically call 2 cards of different grades. And if you can see, like, for example, grade 0 and a grade 3 heal, and then you just throw them together, which you couldn't do before with grade 0 heals because obviously you can't have that many. You could never get that many high shields back in the day, so that was good as well to have access to. You can also search it with your grade 3 search, as mentioned earlier. Next we have Gurguit. So I was actually testing this as a proxy for Ultima, but I actually think this card should be included because after a bit of testing, Cam Blast management is not even that hard, and being able to give 5 units 5k, obviously he can give himself loads of power, but the fact you can give the 5 units 5k helps you to swing over like dangerous stuff, and you can spam his ability as well, so you can basically deal with cards that give Vanguard more power, which is really good to have as well. 2 copies of Glorious Reign. This is really dangerous for the opponent, but if they're playing Vanguard power-up skills, then this card loses a lot of momentum, which is sort of like the big weakness for golds actually. Which is why Ultima combos were always popular, because Ultima never cared about damage triggers. Now you could actually play this deck around Ultima more, because you could use the G era version of the stride assist to search specifically for Gurguit and then guarantee it. But the thing is, you have to remember you also have to call them from your hand, so you can't spirit call the stride assist and then just search. You actually have to happen to have them in your hand as well for it to work better as well. So there is that problem. Then we've got 2 copies of Gurguit Helios, and he's not as good as he used to be because now there's more and more cards being made. Ever since Protect, Gift, and Draw PGs, this card has been like losing its power. But then they've also given Luard, which is one of the decks that do have grade 1 PGs, they've given them basically their own G-Guard, Perfect Guard. Even Gear Chronicle has their own G-Guard, Perfect Guard now. And they've been playing some grade 1 PGs in some variants like Steam Made in Harlem. Then we've got 2 copies of Heavenly Law Gurguit. He's kind of fallen off as well because you're not really flipping Gurguits as much anymore. But he can call a card from your deck, which is good mid-battle, and then if it's a Canary, you can go for 2 attacks. Then we've got 1 copy of Idvarius, I think it was called. Yeah, Idvarius. Resetting Vanguard. I guess it's a way to gain power as well, or rather hit over things in case your opponent powers with Vanguard. It's quite good for that too. Then we've got 2 copies of Campbell. So Campbell is the errata on hit stride. Now he's not on hit anymore. You check top 5, and then you call a unit. So top 5 is quite a lot of cards. You can find something good. If you find Canary, you can get another attack as well. But otherwise, your unit's getting 2k. You can even get Percival as well, and Percival can then get you the Axel Circle to then set up as well. So that's also nice to have. But the thing is that these on-hit strides, that are no longer on hits, they can now also G-flip themselves, which enables your Generation Break 2 abilities as well. And with that, you can then use Gurguit's GB2 faster, so it makes Spear Cross less important than before as well. And ultimately, you're getting 2 Axel Circles from it as well, which is great. So there's that too. Assuming the erratas are going to follow the same pattern as Skip Blade. You can take out Spear Cross for an Ultima. Now, Spear Cross is probably only ever going to come up if, well, most likely if you go into Percival and you've ridden up first. Because obviously you can't make great of this, but you can still, yeah, call like 2 from the top 5, so you can build a bit of board presence with this, which is also helpful. It enables your GB2, which can help you for later. Then onto the G-Guards. If you call like any grade 1 or greaters with this G-Guard, then you get to draw 1 card. It's basically like a free version of the OTT G-Guards because they have to pay CB1 to draw. This card can do it for free. This is really good, this G-Guard. Insane. Then we've got 2 copies of Semi Flare. This works similar to Gurguit, except you check top 5 and you call 2 Guardians of different grades. So if you ride into Percival, this card is definitely going to be important, but if you ride Gurguit, you might not need him as much, but he's handy to have as well. He can also help to prevent deck out because you can put a card back in and then just not call any guards as well. And then lastly, we've got Elise. Elise is a CB1 G-Guard that can call a card from the top of your deck to Guardian Circle. The thing is with Golds is that they start off with G-Guards that rely on the field existing, but then when this came out, then they no longer need the field. And then they've made this, well, not just this G-Guard, but also this one here as well. So Royal Paladins is unfortunately struggling with field still because all their G-Guards rely on the field, so unless they're playing like very specific sub-clan ones. So yeah, that's pretty much it for my Gurguit G+, I guess we can call it G+, history collection deck profile. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think and how you find it, or how you're finding any of your other G decks you're testing, because there are people that are testing these decks, and it's honestly like a fun time to be playing premium format right now. Well, not right now because these decks aren't actually legal until later, I don't think. So we still have to play with the same old format from before, but this new format is definitely going to be more enjoyable than the current one because there's now like a lot of decks making a splash, I think. But obviously, I'm saying this kind of early on, so we'll see. I just feel like the current one's gone a bit stale now. Like the just reindeer steam in everywhere. It just gets boring after a while. So yeah, until then, I'll see you guys later.